Decentralized and federated networks are the past from which the public internet sprung forth. These models have started to become viable again as the social media silos have begun to be seen as dangerous to the daily operation of society. These new communities live somewhere between the BBS age and Web 2.0, modern, nimble, creative, and largely free of undue outside influence.
Our next presentation will tell the story of how this team did it and how you can do it too.
Please welcome Codebabe, the Doctor, the Gibson, Ryan, and Kirk Strauser with Saving Hacking from the Zaibatsus, a memoir.
Hit me.
And your name goes through like 17 computers a day. 1984, you're right, man. That's a typo. Orwell's here now. He's living large. We have no names, man. No names. We are nameless.
This is a marketing holocaust. 24 hours a day. For the rest of our lives, the powers that be are hard at work, dumbing us to death. So, to defend ourselves and fight against assimilating this dullness into our thought processes, we must learn to read, to stimulate our own imagination, to cultivate our own consciousness, our own belief system. We all need these skills to defend, to preserve our own minds.
And believe this, they did not want you to get this information. So here it is, coming at you, low-tech style.
Hello, Hope 2020. Welcome to the talk, Saving Hacking from the Zaibatsu, a memoir, where we're sitting with a panel today to discuss decentralized and federated services and why they're so important in this day and age. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Hope for giving us this opportunity to speak. So this topic, it's a very broad topic, and there's way more to discuss than we could fit into this 40 to 50 minutes. So think of this panel as a starting point, and we welcome you all to join in on this discussion with us. And we hope you get stoked enough to come hang and build with us. Today's panel is composed of some brave citizens from the Fediverse. First up, we have Mr. The Gibson, the mayor of Hackerstown. And we also have Tech, admin of freeradical.zone. We're also joined by Codebabe, a moderator and netizen of Hackerstown. And we also have someone who is neither shy nor new to Hope. We have the Doctor, or at least a very passable replica, who is also a netizen of Hackerstown. And we have myself, Ryan. I'm a professional noob, and I'm also a moderator and netizen of Hackerstown. The Gibson, would you like to introduce yourself some more?
Sure. I am the Gibson. I run hackers.town, amongst other things, but have been part of the our hacking subculture for, since the late 80s when I was a kid. I really wanted to see something new come about to restore some of that old optimism we had when the internet was new. And this was what gave it to me and why I'm here today.
Right. Tech, can you give us a little intro?
Sure. So yeah, I'm the admin of freeradical.zone. Whenever I was a little kid, I asked my parents for a bike. They gave me a Commodore 64 and a modem, and it was all downhill from there. So one of the things that really drew me to the Fediverse is this, to me, is the modern feeling of the BBS era. We're not going to get that back, but I think we can do something pretty cool now.
All right. Codebabe, can you give us a little intro?
Hi, I'm Codebabe. I'm a moderator at Hackerstown. I have been a web developer for 10 years, and I'm hoping that working with the Fediverse will help bring the web back to the direction I was hoping it would go in and not the way it's been going.
All right. And the Doctor, can you tell us who you are for those of us that don't know?
Well, I go by the handle The Doctor. I'm back in 412 these days. I've been in the hacker community since the early 90s. It's also when I joined the BBS community. And I've generally found social networks really difficult for their intended purpose, which is making friends. And I've made friends and made colleagues in the Fediverse without having to build a brand or any of that social network crap like that. I've met a lot of really good people.
Right. Right. So Tech, can you explain to us what the Fediverse is?
Sure. And since our audience here is very technical, I'm not going to go into a deep dive there. But the gist of it is that the Fediverse is a collection of independently owned and operated servers that all speak a common protocol known as ActivityPub. And it's used to carry messages back and forth between the servers. The elevator pitch for this is that it's kind of like a cross between Twitter and email, and that everything's operated independently. It's kind of a stored and forward architecture where messages get queued on one server and then pushed out to all the subscribers. So that's kind of the technical end of it. As a practical point of view, it looks like Twitter, or as referred to in the Fediverse, bird site. So really, you're chatting with people on other servers, just like you would with email. You know, someone at Gmail can send an email to somebody at a private server. Same thing with the Fediverse. You don't have to be on a one Mastodon instance to speak with people on another instance. In general, the most popular app on the Fediverse is Mastodon. But there are a lot of other cool things that we can probably talk about later. And since they're all built on top of the same ActivityPub Federation protocol, they can all talk together. And that's kind of cool. If you could have a chat on Twitter with someone on Facebook, you know, that would be kind of nifty. So in a nutshell, that is the Fediverse.
All right. Gibson, so why is decentralization important to you?
I actually have what may be a little bit of a religious dedication to decentralization, maybe, which I think a lot of people here at Hope could probably identify with. But the truth of the matter is, we're at a situation where we see more and more centralization and more silos being built of our data and of service offerings. And those two things combined have led to a brittle web. So as we saw last week when Cloudflare had a short outage Friday night, they lost somewhere around a quarter of the entire internet due to their inability to resolve. That's not okay. And then we see things like Twitter getting hacked and all these high value accounts, blue check marks, right? Going down and being lost and infiltrated, and who knows what information leaked from that at this point. Those things are direct results of siloization of personal data and of information. There is no reason for us to have to maintain this model. As a matter of fact, it makes us more susceptible to exploit. It makes everyone definitely more targetable by advertisers and those that would want to spy on you, and puts all that data in one place for it to be abused. When you look at decentralization and federation in particular, you get a similar experience. You get a system where you can talk to anybody on that network, which feels kind of like a Twitter, right, or a Facebook or Instagram, whatever platform you're running in the Fediverse. You know, that feeling of having a wider area you can speak with and talk to gives you that larger feel that you get from some of the silos. The other side of that is that because each server is its own target and separate, it's very difficult to abuse. It's really hard for an advertiser to come to the Fediverse and gather data and target people for advertising, for example, or, you know, if, you know, God forbid, someone decided to spy on the Fediverse, it would be difficult. So you have to target so many different servers to do this instead of one infrastructure piece, right? Instead of just going to Twitter and buying access to the data, or Facebook or Google or whoever. You don't have that capability really in a decentralized and federated social network. You could. Let me be clear. You could, but it takes a lot more resources and is much more difficult to abuse.
It would also be much easier to spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Doctor, same question. Why is decentralization important to you?
It's important to me because having a centralized infrastructure is a central point of failure. As anyone who's ever worked in a data center or an office with a single DSL line and a single firewall can attest to. One thing dies and then everything grinds to a halt. So by pivoting to distributed systems across the entire internet and deliberately avoiding these centralized systems, just like IRC, you may get the occasional net split, but due to how instances can find one another for the purposes of synchronizing and passing messages along, it's much less of a hazard than it is on any reasonably sized IRC network. Sure, servers come and go once in a while, instances vanish for whatever reason, domain names don't get renewed, or an outage, or somebody decides to just, for whatever reason, close their instance down. The users of those instances can still download all of the stuff that they've posted, their contact lists, all of their images and videos they've uploaded, go to a different instance, or stand up their own for that matter, reload everything from scratch, and pick up where they left off, sometimes in mid-conversation for that matter. Yay, health threads.
We like health threads.
Stress test Postgres.
Why not?
All right, Code Babe, why do you think decentralization is important?
Decentralization is important to me because it's really tough to use the internet these days without encountering some form of advertising. And I am a staunch opponent of tracking and targeted advertising, and being able to create your own space and decide what's in it and whether or not people can follow you is a huge thing for me. So
that does come back to moderation features that are built into ActivityPub as well that are very critical. We'll get to those in a little bit, but that's a very key thing.
Tech, why is decentralization important to you?
All right, so we're kind of seeing this right now with the large social networks. They're having a hard time figuring out, like, what's the right mix of moderation from their point of view. What is the giant one-size-fits-all recipe that is going to allow, say, the president of the U.S. to operate under the same rules as some person working out of their garage? The thing is, there probably never can be one set of consistent rules that apply perfectly to everybody that will make sense everywhere. So what I really love about the federated model is that every little group kind of can operate as a freestanding community. And each community can have its own rules. For instance, my server, Free Radical, is, I'm not going to say we're a free speech zone. That kind of has a special meaning in the Fediverse, reserved for like generally Gab and groups like that. But it's generally fairly hands-off. You can get away with saying a fair amount of decent stuff as long as you're respectful to everyone. But we do have hard rules, like don't use our server to spread like misinformation about the COVID virus, for instance. We're just not doing it. And because we're small, we can make rules like that that make sense for our community. Most instances that we talk to a lot have fairly similar sets of moderation rules. I know Hackerstown and Free Radical are pretty identical in that way as far as like what we would allow. But there are instances that are like safe spaces for like people of color, for LGBTQ groups, that are, the rules are very particular to them, and that's awesome. So they can have a social network for their community where the rules make sense for the group of people that are there. But again, we can still talk to each other. I can talk to people on those servers and have a good conversation. Now, if I violate some of their rules, they can say, that one person is no longer welcome to talk on our server. He's kind of a jerk. We don't like him. And, you know, they have that fine-grained control to be able to do that. And I think that's kind of wonderful. We don't have to come up with a one-size-fits-all. We can come up with what's right for our community. And we can branch out from there. We can run a million little parallel experiments to see what works best, and, you know, hopefully come up with something decent we can all live with.
Agreed.
All right. So Gibson, how can someone get started with the Fediverse?
There's a lot of different platforms that you can host on the Fediverse, whether it be Mastodon, and I'm going to forget some because there's so many, but there's Mastodon, there's Pleroma, there's PixelFed, which is kind of like an Instagram-ish thing. There's Glitch Social, which is what we run at hackers.town, which is a Mastodon variant. So even within each platform, there's variants beyond that on what your server experience is going to be like, just from a features perspective. Beyond that, you know, I mean, and Ryan, you can speak to this because you manage some of this yourself, but I mean, at hackers.town, we've got a PeerTube instance, right? We have video.hackers.town. So we have our own little YouTube that has videos that we've made or that are important to our community, because community is what drives all this, right? You're able to tune your signal in the Fediverse to be what's right for your community. And that's something we don't get anywhere else. You don't have that community feeling in that small community that you can help manage. But beyond that, the easiest way to probably do this, to get your feet wet, is to go to mastodon.social. It's the big flagship instance, right? And sign up there and try to figure out where you may fit. If there's another instance you want to go to that you find, you ask for membership, or if they're open, you can just join and go from there. But that discovery phase, that initial phase to find out where is going to be the best community for you, is probably best done at mastodon.social. You know, I didn't mention Friendica. Yeah, I know there's a lot of platforms out there that are on ActivityPub, and which is the protocol behind it. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet. But those platforms all can talk to each other. They're all capable of exchanging messages with each other, which makes it very flexible. I mean, just imagine if you had an actual protocol behind Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everything, that could all communicate with each other clearly and openly. And then you also have a lack of data silos. You have small communities that are hosting that data instead, which tends to give you a better situation as far as data management goes.
All right. Tech, you got anything to add on to that? How someone can get started with the Fediverse?
No, I think that advice is right on point. Join the biggest instance and look around, see who people are talking to, see what community tends to, or that you tend to interact with the most. One thing I'd point out is that on Mastodon, it is very common to have accounts on multiple servers. So, I mean, that's fine. If you want to join there and then like later migrate to another server, if you want to migrate completely, awesome. If you want to just, maybe you want to divide that between your work and your hobby accounts, that's cool too. But yeah, I think probably jumping in where there are a lot of people to interact with is the best advice. And again, remembering that just because you join one server, you can still talk to everybody on all the other servers too, with an asterisk. But in general, that's the case.
Right. And to that point, moderation features lock certain communities down to themselves. They may lock themselves off. They may be offensive to so many communities. They end up kind of in their own bubble. That's not normal, right? That's usually reserved for situations where you've got a extreme political views or racist views or whatever, those will tend to get pruned off into their own little bubble in the Fediverse and won't really interact with much outside of their own chamber. That said, the local community being the size that it is and moderation features being strong allow for management of that pretty well for whatever any community tolerates.
Doctor, you got anything to add to that? How someone gets started with the Fediverse?
Sure. So there is I don't want to call it a search engine. It's more of a searchable directory. And I really hope I'm getting the domain name right, federation.party, where you can click a couple of buttons and say, I'm looking for a small or medium or a large sized instance. I'm looking for a federated instance or an isolated instance. I'm looking for this kind of moderation policy. I'm looking for like this kind of theme, like we have cyber.space for cyberpunk, hackers.town, obviously. There's one that is dedicated to art. I want to say it's ArtStation, but I think I'm wrong. And it'll give you a list of all of the instances it knows about that you may want to join. And once you've joined one of these instances, there are 3 really good ways to find people to follow. And this is what I usually recommend to people. The first is look at your instance's global timeline, because every instance has a global timeline. It has a view of the timeline of every server in the Fediverse, and it has your personal timeline for everyone you follow. Look at your instance's local timeline for a little while. Look for people who look interesting, start conversations, post stuff, and just follow people and see if they follow you back. Once you've got a couple of folks there, look at the global federated timeline. Look for stuff going on, start conversations, join conversations, follow people that way. And then there's also a bootstrap directory of people who have opted in, broken down into categories that you can choose to join if you want to. So there's categories for the LGBTQ community, there's categories for gymnasts, there's categories for hackers, there's categories for artists, for video producers, for pretty much any kind of category you might imagine. And you can click on the names of those folks, see what they post, see how they act, see how they respond. And if you want to interact with them, you can interact with them from your whatever instance you want. If you want to follow them, you can follow them. Also, occasionally we do Pound FF or Follow Fridays where people post the Fediverse links to really cool people, and you can again look at that post, click on each of those profiles, see what they're like, decide who to follow from there, or who to interact with.
Code Babe, anything to add on to how someone gets started with the Fediverse?
No, these guys nailed it. Just comment the art instance you were looking for was mastodon.art.
What is it?
Okay.
Mastodon.art.
Mastodon.art. Thank you.
Yeah, that one's good.
All right. So Gibson, any advice for anyone that wants to get started running their own instance?
Be ready to know how to use PostgreSQL. You're gonna be using that quite a bit and abusing it, to be honest. Plan out what your infrastructure is going to look like so that it's easily upgradable and fault tolerant, right? So be able to have a couple VMs maybe that are replicating over, so that if one has a problem, you may be able to save it in the other VM slot. That's if you're hosting locally like we do. We host on site in our own data center. There are other, cloud instances are as low cost as $5 a month to run in some of the hosts that have this prepackaged. You can spin up a Mastodon instance for the cost of a domain and $5 a month if you really want to. And honestly, even if you have a few hundred users, you're in the $20 a month range if you really want to host that. So you can do this pretty cost effectively. Most of the instances on the Fediverse are either run for free by some generous soul, or they have things like fundraisers like we do. most often we sell T-shirts and hoodies, in case anybody's wondering, because we think it's funny that everybody wants to fight the hacker hoodie stereotype, but we just lean into it because it's funnier that way. But we do that, but a lot of places do just monthly donations, Patreon type style things to keep the lights on. One of the things that we did in particular at hackers.town, when we started spinning up all these other resources, we ended up with our own Gatia server. Once again, Rye, thank you. That's all your work, so I can't take credit on that one, but it's part of the community, right? And the PeerTube server, so on and so forth. And we've been able to find, for the most part, ways to host this at very little cost for the services provided. And sometimes they're in someone's home, right? But at the same time, you're looking at having a community come together, support itself, and be almost an anarchist collective in a way on how they're providing these services to their community. I very much believe that virtualized communities are just as important as real world physical communities in many ways, in any way, really. And I've held that belief for a long time. So seeing communities be able to come together and spin this infrastructure up to build these things, and then do things like, put together teams to go, put blue team type tools into the hands of users to keep themselves private and safe online. We did that. Things like that, to me, are what make this worth it. We're able to extend beyond the traditional data silos and then spin up ways to fight back on that front, legally and effectively, but ways that we can stop them from taking our data incidentally as well, because we got the right minds in the right place to do that kind of work. And that kind of thing brings a lot of value. And if your community isn't about that life, and that's great, there are plenty of other things that can be done there, right? But bringing that community together and having an idea for what that community is going to constitute really is important, because it's going to increase the value and what you get out of that community at the other end. You get out of it what you put into it, right? And that's kind of where this comes from. It is a labor of love if you do host one, but it is very rewarding most of the time.
Tech, do you have any advice for anyone that wants to start running their own instance?
So great advice from Gibson. And I would just kind of build on that. So going back to the idea of like the Fediverse is like a collection of BBSs, pick a theme early on. If you want your instance to be successful, figure out what's going to be special about your instance. Hackerstown has a clear brand. I've been maybe not as diligent about that. I have like a bunch of InfoSec stuff, also a lot of pictures of cats. But like figure out what it is that will make your instance special. Why would people want to come and hang out with you? I think that's probably the biggest thing. As far as costs, right now I run almost everything off a 4 gig RAM DigitalOcean instance. That's for the main server, the database, the media. For media storage, like all the pictures of cats and stuff that people post, I have uploaded to S3. That's a built-in feature of Mastodon, so that you don't have to host all the images locally. Storage is a little bit cheaper per byte. I want to say my monthly operating costs are about $35, $40 total for the server, for all the S3 storage, for the backups that I do and everything. And for a sense of scale, that's for approximately 1,600 users. So if you want to operate an instance for like you and your friends to get started, like throw it on a spare VM that you already have stood up. That would totally work. If you really want to grow large, there are horizontal scaling options, as you mentioned, like having multiple servers running in a cluster. You can totally do that. You don't have to. Don't go crazy with it whenever you're first getting started, and just kind of naturally grow into that.
Isn't there an activity pub implementation that is small enough to run on a Raspberry Pi? I know a couple of personal instances do that.
Pleroma will. I know there's some others I believe that will as well. Mastodon's a little heavy for that. I like to make the elephant joke, right? It's Mastodon. It's got a few tons, but I know there are plenty of other platforms that can. Yeah.
Oh, there's also Brutal Dawn, which is it gives a simplified interface. So if your browser can't handle a lot, that's a good option too.
Yeah, I think Brutal Dawn is links friendly, isn't it?
I believe so.
Oh, nice.
All right. Code Babe, is there any Fediverse projects that you're excited about? Maybe even your own you got going on?
I'm actually really looking forward to Pixel Fed picking up, because I know a lot of people, when they interact on social media, sharing images is a huge part of that. And there are large, vibrant communities on Instagram that I would love to see, move to the Fediverse. And I think the more refined Pixel Fed gets, the closer we'll get to achieving that.
Doctor, any Fediverse projects that you're excited about?
Oh, geez. I've spent way too much time playing with the API for stuff like scrobbling. Let's see, there's scrobbling, there's automatic cross-posting of links, bookmarks, blog posts. I run the number station. That's just sort of a fun side project. There's also an instance that is dedicated to Markov bots. I think pretty much everyone here has a mini-me running there. That's, Skynet.social. I know I've got a mini-me. I know you have one, Gibbs. I think you do, Code Babe.
No.
No, not yet. Haven't set it up.
Ironically, my mini-me is named The Plague.
Mr. The Plague.
Tech, is there any Fediverse projects you're excited about?
So I think PeerTube is one of the coolest things ever. PeerTube, in a nutshell, is YouTube, and the Fediverse. So it's a video hosting site. You can upload videos to it, and again, it looks a lot like PeerTube. The cool part is obviously not everybody has, like a 40 gigabit uplink to the internet. So the web app that you run has a BitTorrent protocol implemented in JavaScript, so that if two people are watching a video at the same time, they are actually peering the video with each other as they watch it. So yeah, if you're watching a PeerTube video, you get done watching a video, you leave it open, other people are going to start kind of feeding off of you too. I think this is a tremendously cool hack. It's a great way for people without a lot of bandwidth to be able to still host videos. If you have 10,000 viewers, you're not going to have 10,000 times the bandwidth as if you have one viewer. Super cool. I hope this catches on, and I want to see where that goes. But because it's federated, you can also you can follow a PeerTube instance user from Mastodon and reply to it, to like a post that they make. And then on the PeerTube page, you can see that reply as a comment on the video. So again, it'd be sort of like following someone on YouTube from Twitter, replying to them on Twitter, and seeing their comment show back up in YouTube.
Yeah, PeerTube's a fun one. Just over my shoulder for a while. I was running the video.hackerstown right out of the closet over here. But once COVID hit, our bandwidth around here just kind of dropped a lot. So it was kind of, everybody needs this to work. So we'll move the PeerTube.
But we migrated it. Didn't lose it.
Yep, still alive and kicking.
All right. Gibson, any Fediverse projects you're stoked about?
Honestly, I'm more in on decentralization and federation as a whole. I'm glad to see all these things coming along the way they have. In particular, I am very interested in what one of our netizens at hackers.town is doing with a Facebook equivalent of for the Fediverse, right? Written in Rust, as he has told me many times. But the thing is, and what's important about these projects is they need people that can volunteer time, right? These are open source projects. These aren't things that have a development budget or anybody behind them, except the communities they're going to serve. So, in his case, I know he's had a really hard time finding Rust developers to work on this thing, and that really slows down some of the progress. Some of the larger already implemented ones, or the one-man show ones where it's somebody that's capable of doing it all by themselves. Those are pretty exciting to see happen, but there's some really exciting ideas and options out there that just need a little push from the community. And so it's one of my goals to try to help him find some people that can contribute to that, because I'd love to see something that can take Facebook down. I would love to see nothing more on this entire frickin' earth than something that takes Facebook down. Let me say that again. Set Facebook on fire, allegedly.
All right. So anybody else got anything else to add that they want to say before we jump into questions?
I would say that Hope is taking its first steps into Federation by running a Matrix server, which has Federation turned on. You can set up an account on riot.hope.net, or not a few of us have joined from our personal Matrix instances, or whatever instance we hang out on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm logged in on both my Hope account and my Hackerstown account.
Mm-hmm. Yep, me too.
Mm-hmm. All right. So y'all ready to jump into questions from the audience?
Yeah, we got
Sure.
about right time.
Right.
Doing good.
Did somebody say questions from the audience?
Thanks, Rob.
Hello. Our pleasure. So as your MCs, I will mention that you're watching Saving Hacking from the Zaibatsus. Thank you very much to all of you here today for joining us. And there has been such a great amount of chat and questioning and everything in our live stream channel. I'd encourage all of you attending Hope 2020 to post your questions for the panel in our live stream Q&A channel on our Matrix server. I'd like to go right into the questions here. A member of the audience asks, can you talk about your security protocols?
Well, yeah. So when you get into security, you've got a couple different questions there, right? So one of the things we do, we have dedicated IPS IDS on hackers.town, and we also have some dedicated detection capabilities for any kind of attempted intrusion. Beyond that, security protocols are pretty standard for any web app. You're looking at SSL TLS across the board. The one weakness, I don't want to call it a weakness, it's not fully developed yet, but there is a space where not truly security, but privacy, where end-to-end encryption is not fully enabled. It's really not there yet. You're point-to-point encrypted between instances and between the instance and the web browser, but the messages themselves inside those instances are not necessarily encrypted, and admins can see them, right? So that feature is coming. I talked to the developer Mastodon in the past, actually yesterday, I believe, if I remember correctly, just to confirm before we had this talk, that he's working on that feature. The actual infrastructure behind it is in place and ready to go, and they just got to get a UI on it to make it work correctly. So that I'm going to make a bet that the Fediverse has end-to-end encryption on private messages before Twitter does.
I would like to add to that quickly. Yeah, as it stands today, do not use the Fediverse for something that's going to land you in jail or fired if it gets found out. The security is not there today. It's being worked on. A lot of people are asking for it. A lot of people are actively developing these things. But as it stands today, probably don't go and plan a protest. Maybe depending on what country you live in, assume that stuff that you're posting could be viewed by people that you don't expect it to.
Okay.
But again,
next,
this is short term.
Okay. Next question from the audience. Can you give any background on how the Fediverse, specifically Mastodon, has handled the intrusion of Gab into the network?
They are off on their own little island, and hardly anybody actually communicates with them. They showed up. Everybody was pretty well prepared to close them as soon as they did. There was some hopping of domain names because your moderation of federation, that rhymed. Your moderation of federation actually depends on using domain name, not IP. You can block the IP at the firewall for whatever you're doing for that, but as far as the actual built-in moderation goes, it depends on DNS. Almost every server on the Fediverse implemented moderation features to lock Gab off. There's a really neat map out there that shows federation between all the servers in the Fediverse and who's talking to who, and they're this point way off in the distance with like 3 or 4 lines going to them, and that's it. So they kind of, due to the nature of their content largely, they walled themselves off by showing up, which may be actually what they wanted. If they wanted their own silo, well, okay, I can't tell them that they're bad for that, but I get the feeling that they expected to have a bullhorn, and they didn't get that. For example, though, the Jester, famous on Twitter and such, has his own fork of it that was kind of controversial, where he broke federation with everyone. He doesn't federate with anybody anymore. So that is definitely a silo he built called Counter.social. It exists out there. It's the same platform underneath his Mastodon, but all federation is turned off.
Do you have any thoughts about other approaches to decentralization, such as the indie web? CodeBabe, I know you had some feelings about it.
Indie web is definitely something that needs to make a comeback. It's how the web started, and there's a lot we can do for discovering each other's content without Google. One of the things we can do is bring back web rings. I actually recently made a web ring. I implemented it for Hackerstown. It's called the Hackerstown Loop. You go and you can skim through several community members' websites, as well as services available from our directory page. And I think the more we bring back tools like that to help people do indie web, it'll be better for the future of the web.
You've made a great case to how the Fediverse gets away from the advertising-driven algorithmic content and from centralization and corporate control. The one thing I don't think has been addressed is how to address the feeling of drinking from the fire hose social media gives us, as opposed to more private chat. What do you see as solutions for making the sheer volume of Fediverse content more manageable?
One of the things about the Fediverse is I don't think anybody really feels obligated to keep up with everything. It is very common for people to just not log in for a couple of days, a couple of weeks. A couple of denizens of Hackers.town decided to go on hiatus in January and February, and that's fine. We're still here. When they come back, it'll be like they never left. We'll just pick up where we left off, be it in a conversation or, hey, how's your cat doing?
These are community friendships in many cases, right? And the doctor's exactly right. These are people that are like old friends when they show up, at least as far as I'm concerned. So the pressure isn't there to perform the same way it is, say, on Twitter or Facebook. And it takes a while when you leave them. This will speak to the power of current social media, agreeing with the question here. When you leave them and go spend time on the Fediverse solely for a while, there is a detox period, very much so, where you are learning to not be driven by the notifications, and you're learning not to just say the first thing that comes out of your brain when you're on the Fediverse, and think it through and think about other perspectives. It's actually, in my opinion, a far healthier network than what we have today everywhere else.
Yeah, just throwing in from my own experience as a denizen of Hackers.town and
nice
flying the flag a little bit. Appreciate all your work. But also, like, as someone who's been a part of what we know as social media since the start, and I was on BBSs and I was on Usenet and all these other things, Hackers.town and the Fediverse in general really feel the most to me like the internet did back then, when you would, leave the house, go about your day, do whatever, then come home and catch up on, okay, what happened on the internet today? What communication is going on there? Because it's like a nice little specialized thing as opposed to the all-encompassing, 24/7 fire hose that mainstream social media has become.
I also like that. So Mastodon in particular has several different lists that you might look at. If I've got like 2 minutes free at work, I'll pop on and see my personal list of people who have mentioned me, direct messages, reply to that stuff. If I have a few more minutes, I'll check out the list of all of the people on my server to see what they're chatting about at this moment. If it's like 2 a.m. and I've finished reading all of the internet and now I want more internet, you can jump on to the federated timeline. What that is, that's like the covering set of everybody that everyone on my server talks to. So, there are thousands and thousands of people here. It's never boring, but that's not my go-to. That's where I jump in after I've read everything else and, hey, ADHD's in full drive. I got to see everything, but that's optional. You don't have to start there.
It's also interesting that a couple of forks of Mastodon, and I don't know if this has made it into mainline Mastodon. If you feel like you need to pay attention to how many followers you have and you want to break that habit, you can just turn it off. Mm-hmm. You'll perpetually see -1. There's also an instance, I think it was witches.town, everyone's follower count was hard-coded to 666. So nobody knew how many followers they had.
But that's the beauty of it, right? We've got this uniqueness that we can configure at each instance level that fits the community. If you want to do something silly like that, I mean, our character count at hackers.town is 10,000. I can tell you no one has ever actually used that 10,000 count that I know of. And you can do things like that. You can customize this thing and you can own it. You can make it the community center that you want it to be. And then all the other platforms that rise up around it, that just adds flavor. I mean, we have Demo Sunday, a Demo Scene Sunday event every Sunday, where Remote Nemesis, one of our other mod, the one that isn't here today, he kind of starts posting interesting demo scene tracks he's found on our PeerTube, right, and throws them onto the Fediverse. It's got a pretty big following. We've got the guy that made the video for our intro, Mnemonic. Mnemonic has. He runs We Are Nameless, which is a video watching party, a movie watching party every week, right? So it's pretty good. I mean, it's just interesting to see that community spring up and happen, and organically.
Absolutely. We've only got about a minute left, so really quickly, I'll ask this one more question from the audience. A member asks, pardon my unfamiliarity with specific terms, but how does a newbie go about joining new instances, towns, etc.? For example, something like Hackers.town.
At Hackers.town, we have our registration closed. I will tell you that the entry fee for Hackers.town is very low. You have to agree to our code of conduct and we'll send you an invite. That's generally how that works. We aren't trying to be exclusive. We're just trying to keep people and bots that shouldn't be there, that could just passively come by and jump in and cause problems from coming, right? You have to ask. But we are very open about who we bring in. But beyond that, I would tell you, like we said earlier, go to mastodon.social, sign up there, see if you can find a community around there that you talk to a lot, you feel like you're a part of, and then go explore that. You see people all the time that come and go from communities in the Fediverse, and that's okay, because they're trying to find the right one for them. They're trying to find the right signal, and that's to be expected and should be accepted and lauded. People should be okay with that, and that's one of the things you'll have to break coming from normal social media to the Fediverse. That awareness that you may have some dedication or tainted feelings from social media that you have to drop when you get there.
Absolutely, and we'll have to leave it there because we're just about out of time. But thank you very much, Code Babe, Dr. Gibson, Ryan, and Tech for joining us today. And
thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, 1500 Eastern Time, Radio Statler.
Oh yeah, Radio
Yeah.
Statler.
Excellent.